friends, and welcome to the School Librarian Learning Network podcast. I'm Steve Tatro, also known as Dr. T Loves Books, and I love talking about all things related to school libraries. I may be an old dog, but I'm always trying to learn new tricks. In each episode of the SLLN podcast, I'll chat with a school librarian about a lesson they love. Hopefully, this can be a place for school librarians to get ideas and find new ways to engage with their students and staff. As a good friend likes to say, we're better together. So I hope this podcast will help school librarians connect with and learn from each other. The opinions and ideas shared in this podcast by myself and my guests are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. And because school librarians always strive to be good digital citizens, I cite sources when using material that is not my own. Without further ado, let's get to this week's episode. Hey everybody, I am back again and I am so excited. We've got Dustin Hensley with us, and Dustin is a man of just many talents, many skills, so much knowledge. I am so glad that he's here with us. So Dustin, welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're at?
Hey, I am Dustin Hensley. I am a school librarian here in Elizabethton, Tennessee, and I go by he, him pronouns. I am also the current president of the Tennessee Association of School Librarians.
And I had the great good fortune to go to the Tennessee Library Conference, and man, it was amazing. You guys really know how to throw a good party. So how did you end up in the school library? Like, was this you knew from the start that's where you wanted to be?
Yeah, so I went to college with the idea that I was going to be a history professor. So I started my bachelor's in history. And I was getting my endorsement in secondary education, thinking that I'll teach high school history while I finish go to a master's doctorate. And that was kind of like my path I had laid out for myself from very early on in middle school. I knew that's what I wanted to do. And while I was doing that, I started working an after-school program at the high school that I had attended in the school library, helping students with their credit recovery. And I absolutely loved working in the library space. I had spent a lot of time there when I was in school, and it's something I really enjoyed being in. And at that same time, I'm taking my education classes in college, and I start feeling like I really don't like this, because the part of it I didn't like was that I was forcing knowledge on kids. Mm-hmm. That they might come into the classroom and say, I want to learn about this specific thing today. And I'd have to tell them, too bad, you're learning about this instead. And I'm like, I just don't feel like consciously that I can do this, that I can spend my whole life forcing a specific thing on kids learning when they want to learn about what they want to learn about. And like, this is happening at the same time I'm working in a library, and I'm like, library feels like the perfect thing to do. Yeah. So I asked my high school librarian, like, what was the pathway that you took? She told me about master's in school librarianship. So that's what I did. I finished with my bachelor's in history and immediately went into getting my master's in school librarianship, because I was told by a lot of people, and I know it's different in lots of different states, but a lot of people told me, like, you've got to be a teacher first before you can be a librarian. And I said, well, too bad. I'm going to be a librarian. That's what I want to do. So that's what I'm going to do. So I was very fortunate to get a school library job very early on. I only had to be a classroom teacher for one semester before. I taught English language learners for one semester, then got to be a elementary librarian for one semester, then fortunately moved to the high school level, where I have been for 9 years since then.
Nice. Man, I didn't realize that your journey went in that sort of a direction. And it's funny because hearing you talk about, I didn't want to force learning on students. I feel like I see that in all of the work that you have done, that I see, that you share online, that you really are all about inquiry and authentic learning, which is outstanding. I mean, it's so wonderful.
Yeah.
So this lesson kind of ties in with that, which is awesome. So let's start with just like, what do you call this lesson?
So this is community improvement, and the way that I teach this lesson is it is a semester-long lesson, that this is the course itself, that it is an elective course that kids can take during their enrichment time. Nice. And it's open to any student, freshman through senior. And the way that we do this course is that we take the entire semester to really look at our community and allow them to determine what community means to them. So is community our school community? Is it our city? Is it like the neighborhood you live in? Is it our county? Is it our region? I am in cultural Appalachia. So geographically, Appalachia goes from like Georgia to New York. That's a very long stretch. But
Yeah.
culturally, Appalachia is this one little segment of Northeast Tennessee, parts of North Carolina, West Virginia, Kentucky. Like if you can imagine like the hillbilly stereotype, like that's the area that I live in. So like I allow them to choose what they want that to be, that they want to really dig in and trust. I want them to think, what are issues that you see in our community and how could we make improvements?
I love that you're giving them sort of that ownership of what level of community and really reminding them like we are all parts of multiple sets of communities. And even when we're in school, there are multiple communities within the school. But outside of that, like that's really such a great, I think, I don't know if it's an eye opener for all students, but I think there are a lot of students who just don't consider the fact that they are parts of different groups and those groups have different needs.
Right. And one of the first things that we have a discussion about, so the beginning of the class is just discussion about what do all these things mean. And one of the first discussions we have is that just because we are in school right now does not mean you're part of the community outside these walls. That a lot of time as educators, we say to students, when you're in the real world, this is the way things will be. They're already part of that. That we create this like false reality that is the school building in which they don't exist outside of it. They do, of course they do. That's where they spend their lives in the real world. Right. So they're living it every day. So I don't like us having that discussion of, well, when you're in the real world, when you're in school, those should not be separate entities.
Yeah.
They are existing as a human in all of those different spaces. So how do I tear down those walls and allow them to see that I can, like what I'm doing right now makes a difference in the community around me. And what happens in the community makes a difference to what's happening here in the school as well.
Yeah. And I imagine, too, some of those conversations probably revolve around how they're not part of certain communities, like how maybe they don't feel like they fit in some places.
Right. Oh, definitely. So part of that, again, that initial discussion is what are things that you are not allowed to do in the community? Like you're not allowed to vote. So because of your age, you're excluded from allowing your voice being allowed to be heard on different topics. So you're excluded in that way. But are there ways that you could be part of that conversation? That how do we make those connections to where you still have voice and agency in the community despite your age? And that's part of this discussion about the school as well, is that you are the most important stakeholder in a school, but you're also the least represented in the discussion of how does the school operated. So inside of the school community, how are you as the learner represented, and how do we make sure that you are part of that conversation?
I think that especially, I feel like right now there is a moment going on in education where kids feel really disconnected from and disempowered by what's going on in education. Like they're kind of just, they're there because they have to be there. But I don't know. I feel like I'm seeing it a lot in my district, and I have heard other people say similar things, that kids just don't seem to be engaging with their education as much. And I love this idea of reminding them they are the centerpiece of this, and they do have, what they have to say matters. They've got voice, they've got agency, and there's things that they can do to affect the world around them if it's not going the way they want it to.
Wow. Yeah, and I think that part of that discussion and part of what this class is trying to accomplish is them seeing that you do matter, and I'm going to make sure that you see that you matter. That it's okay if you try to do something and it doesn't work out, that's okay. I'm trying to teach you that you can go out and try something, that you can go and have a discussion with the director of the Parks and Recreation Department or whoever it might be. And I'm kind of jumping the ball here a little bit, but what's really cool about the class is at the very beginning of the semester, once they pick out their projects for what they want to accomplish. And something about the class is that they're not just creating like a fake thing that they would do if they could. It's that they actually have to try to accomplish what they want to do.
That's awesome.
They're not just saying like, if I live in a perfect world, I'll try to do this thing. It's no, like we're going to do the thing. Like if you want to affect homelessness in our area, then we have to do something to try to affect homelessness in the area. Like you have to bring it to implementation.
You can't wait for the perfect world to try and implement the changes.
Exactly. So very early in the semester, once they like it finally clicks that we're actually doing something and not just doing a project or whatever, or make-believe project is that they'll like, hey, I need your help writing an email. Great, that's perfect. I'll help you write that email. And then by the end of the semester, they'll be like, hey, can I go make a phone call to the mayor really quick? You're 15 years old. Like, what do you mean you're calling the mayor? Of course you can. So it's so cool to see the progress that they make from the very beginning to where they're like, wait, you're going to let us do this? Like you actually want us to do this? Like, we started school last week, and we got through like our initial discussions and such. We're just having our conversations of what they want to do for the semester. And I had a group of students talk about homelessness. That's the first thing they want to talk about. So on Friday, we started talking about it again, and they're like, wait, we're actually doing this, aren't we? I'm like, yeah, we are actually doing this. They're like, whoa, it just kind of hit that this is something that we actually are doing. I'm like, welcome to class.
That's awesome when you get that light in their eyes and you see like, oh man, it's really sinking in. Oh,
yeah.
That's the best.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh, that's awesome. So, okay, I'm a student. I come in, we're talking about what community means. How do we get from talking about community to start talking about what the project is going to be? Is it just one project for the whole class? Is it like, how does that sort of work out?
Yeah, so the way that we do it is the first thing that we do once we've talked about community and such is that we break down our different definitions of community, and then we'll have a collective discussion of what are issues that we see in these different communities. So inside the school, what do you think are issues that you see? Like a good example is school lunch. Like they will always, every class I've ever taught will always bring up school lunch as something that needs improvement. Great, we'll have a discussion about that. So we'll talk through the design thinking process of what that looks like for school lunch. If we were going to improve school lunch, how would we do that? First, we would need to interview people that affects, which it kind of clicks for them when I first tell that part, is that we're not doing this just because it's the way you want it done. We're doing this for everyone that it affects. So who are all the different people that this one thing would affect? So if we're changing school lunch, who would that affect? Students. Great. Who else? Who else is involved in school lunch? Oh, cafeteria workers. Great. Okay, so we need to talk to them about how will that affect them. Who else is involved? The nutrition manager, because she's the one that makes purchases. Great. Talk to them. Figure that out. So then that's like we're just starting to build up. It's called empathy interviews. Is what we're doing. Is we're understanding like who are the people all affected by this, and do this on a very small scale, so that whenever they start working on, like they usually just see all the things on the board that we've discussed, and they'll usually just pick one of those and be like, hey, I do care about that thing. I'd like to fix it. And that's kind of where we start. And it is not a class-wide project. It is either a solo or small group.
Okay.
So usually they will go into groups of 2, 3, or 4. Very rarely do I have a student that wants to go solo. Sometimes I do because they want pure ownership. They're like, I want to do this thing and it's mine. Like, go for it. But usually 2 or 3 is the size of groups. And I just work with them in their small groups. My class time is just me running the library nonstop to have discussions of what's happening, where do you need to go, whose number do you need, whose email address do you need, who could be the person to talk to. And that is me for the semester, basically, is just trying to make connections for the students, see what they need, what guidance do they need, who else in the building could they work with. That kind of thing is where I'm at on the teacher level. Once they kind of get off the ground of needing, like, figuring out what is actually happening in the class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's wow. I mean, anytime that you can be on the side and letting them take the lead, I think is always good education. And it sounds like that is like exactly where you're at. Like just the whole thing is they're doing it. And I love that you facilitate. You'll help them find what they need, but you're really letting it be on them to do what they're going to do.
Yeah, and a discussion we have quite often in our small groups is me telling them that there is a great chance that this won't work out, but you are more than welcome to try it. I'm not going to keep them from moving forward if they want to keep going. It's usually a really good learning experience that they can say, hey, I really wanted to try it. I did try it. I can look back and say it didn't work because of these reasons. And they're usually really appreciative that I let them go forward and fail. And a discussion that we have, the first discussion we ever have in the class, is that I do not care about a letter or a number on a piece of paper that you get at the end of the semester. That does not matter to me whatsoever. I have to give you one, but that is not what matters in this class.
Mm-hmm.
I care that you grow as a human and that you help other people. If that's what happens by the end of this class, then you've been successful.
Nice.
So that's the way we frame the class. And sometimes at the very beginning, like the 4.0 kids that sign up for the class, like freak out. They're like, wait, what did you say? You don't care about a grade, Wise? No, it's okay. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, what matters is you learn and you grow as a human. And it's something that you learn different ways so you can be more involved in your community and help people. That's what we care about. That's what matters in this class.
And I imagine even the kids that quote unquote fail they're learning so much, they're reflecting on the experience. And I would guess, I could be completely off base, but I would guess that there's some that continue forward with their project even after the class is complete because they're so invested in what they're working on.
Oh yeah, definitely. I started teaching this class in 2017, and I have had several that just kept going afterwards, or I've had students that ended up picking up internships in different nonprofits or government entities because they formed a relationship with the person that they were working with, or they ended up changing their career goals because of it, which is always amazing to see that when they actually got to do something meaningful that would give them purpose in life. Like I've seen students in the class, because there's no barriers to sign. Anyone can sign up.
Okay.
So I'm not just looking for 4.0 kids. I am really looking for those kids that are not engaged in school because the traditional school model is not for them.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the kids that I love to get because they're desperately looking for something. You think that they just don't care and they're lazy or whatever. Like they've been labeled. I love those kids. Those, like, it's the A kids they're hiding as C kids. Like you know the ones. Those are the best kids for this kind of class because like once they get a hold of it and realize that you want them to accomplish something, they can actually do something, and they just take off.
Oh man, that's got to be so amazing to see. You had mentioned you started this back in 2017. I'm curious, like, what was the genesis of this? What was the impetus to bring this into being?
So I will make a very long story short. That back in spring of 2016, it was fall of 2015. I had found a grant opportunity to rethink the high school experience, and I got 23 students to design what they thought high school should be. So me, two other teachers, 23 students. Basically, the teachers were kind of there to fill out the paperwork. 23 students created a model of what they thought high school should be. They took a whole semester to do this. They were in a sociology class, and they met after school and did this whole huge thing, submitted all of it. It was called the XQ Super School Project. And they ended up being one of the winners. And part of their proposal was that they thought that they, as young people, should be in the community. That's how they should learn. That they didn't like doing worksheets and that kind of thing, or writing, which I know English teachers and such, writing papers. They wanted something authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Authenticity was really big to them. So they wanted to be able to make application of their learning in the community. So that's why we started this class, is that we had received grant funding to kind of get it off the ground. We actually ended up using $0 to start the class and used $0 to ever run the class. So no student project had ever received any funding from that grant. We ended up using it for other things. So anything that they ever did, they had to raise from the community.
Okay.
So it's always really fun whenever they're like, hey, I've got a meeting next week with the president of this bank that I'm going to go try to convince him to give us $5,000 or whatever. Do you feel prepared? Okay, great.
Wow.
And I would like to preface this by saying, I should have prefaced this a long time ago, that, like I said, we're in Appalachia. We're in a very poor region. The median household income of our community, of our county, is $45,000. That is $24,000 less than the national average. That's even $11,000 less than the average of Appalachia as a whole. Wow. So we're in a very, very poor community. So there's not a lot of like wells we can go and try to get money from. They dry up very quickly. So it's always so I just think it's so impressive when they're able to get funding for different things because of like how convincing they're able to be and how much passion they put into the work that they're doing. Because, like I said, there's only so much money to pass around. And
Yeah.
we've got another school district next to our school district that's trying for the same pot of money to get from. Um, so, yeah, it's always really cool to see them get so passionate. They're like, we're going to go meet with all these people to try to raise money and do these proposals. But I was answering the question of why do we start the class? That's how we started the class, was that kids initially back in 2015, 2016 said that we think this is the way learning should be. That we will learn all these different things that we're supposed to learn according to the state if we actually get to go and do something with it. And
Right.
I will say that one of my class's least favorite things to do in the class is I have them go to the Tennessee State Standards website. And they have to look and see what standards they are hitting in their project
Mm.
so that they can show that they're actually hitting what the state says they should be hitting.
Right.
And they're like, teachers have to use this? I'm like, yes, unfortunately, we do have to use this. See, do you understand now? So it's really fun whenever they start figuring out, like, oh, whoa, like me going through the Downtown Business Association and painting this mural, like I'm actually hitting psychology standards and sociology standards on top of just my math. I'm hitting geometry over here. Like, it's really cool when they start connecting all those dots. Because in
And
school, like, we silo everything, but
yeah.
everything's connected.
Yeah.
So they actually get to see, like, oh, like whenever the bell rings, I shouldn't just stop thinking about that thing because it's connected over here too.
Yeah. And I mean, what a great, in my mind, the whole purpose of having educational standards for state and nation, whatever we're at, is to say these are skills that you should be using in your life. And so for them to just directly apply them, like not go through the process of we're going to learn about how to use those skills, we're just going to start using those skills in the real world. What a great learning opportunity for them, man. And I imagine too, just to backtrack for a second, you were talking about, the kids raising their own funds. I imagine that also kind of requires them to think very carefully about the community that they're trying to serve and the issue that they're trying to affect. Because if you've got the issue that people really care about, that's something that's much, I would imagine, more likely to get the funding that they're looking for to move things forward.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like we've got to figure out and do some research beforehand of who would be someone that does care about this topic. Like I mentioned before, the president of a bank, that's someone that cared a lot about athletics. Their children had been in athletics, their grandchildren in athletics at our school. So we had a group of student athletes who were in my class who did not play soccer, but they realized that the soccer team did not have a locker room. And they had to like change inside the school, then come back out, and it was very inconvenient. So like, we wish their soccer team had a locker room. So that was their project, was the soccer locker, which was really fun to say. So they ended up being able to take an old storage shed and completely remodel the whole thing, like new flooring, new lockers, painted the whole thing. They
Nice.
got like TVs donated so they could watch film. Like it was this
Huh.
huge elaborate thing. Like looking at the building beforehand, which was just like there were rakes and stuff in it. It was one of those kinds of buildings, and it turned into this like really like top of the line kind of thing. And it was them just going around and asking like hey, like here's the reason we need this, and getting it and going out and doing the work. Like there was a lot of days they're like, hey, we're going out to paint. That's your job today. You're painters today, or we need to go measure this, so we need to go learn how to build that, or we're going with the maintenance crew because we need to like go cut the things. Like you've been trained, like you went through
Yeah.
like you went and got your OSHA certification or whatever, so that you could actually do the thing.
Did
And
they actually go and get their OSHA certification to do the thing?
I'm pretty sure they ended up doing that. Yeah, this has been a couple of years
Wow.
ago, but I'm pretty sure they went through the shop teacher and got their
Okay.
certifications so that they could work on that. At least one of them did. I
That's
think Evan
awesome.
did.
Huh.
So yeah, like they figured out like these are the steps that we need. And I remember there was a time where it looked like it was going to fail, and like you know how groups end up working. Like the student that was like really spearheading it was so distraught, and he was like,
Mm.
"Man, it's not going to work out. We're going to fail." And I don't think he'd ever felt anything before in his life. Like he did not know how to handle failure, and I'm like, I'm so excited that you're failing. He's like, what? I'm like, this is such a good learning opportunity. I'm like,
Yeah.
you're going to get it. I can tell just from the way things are working, you're going to get this done. But I'm so glad that you're getting the experience of seeing like you're having to push through and make it work. And that I feel like that was one of the best opportunities that they had is that for about 2 week period there, it was like everything's going to fall apart.
Huh.
And they had to push to figure out how do we make this thing work still because we've got our fellow students who are on the soccer team are expecting us to make it work. Like they've
Wow.
seen what
Yeah.
we're doing. They know that we're making this for them. If we don't make it for them, then we've let them all down.
Oh, wow. Talk about your extrinsic motivation
Yeah.
or intrinsic motivation rather. That's amazing. So I'm just curious, like, are they documenting their process as they go? Like, cause I'm picturing just either a video or a slew of pictures of the before, during, and afters as they're doing these projects.
Yeah. So we do, they do a presentation at the end of the semester with a portfolio to
Okay.
demonstrate here is where we started, where we ended up, and they have to be able to tell me this is the learning process. So these are the ways that I grew over the semester. Because for me,
Hmm.
that's the most important thing. That I care a great deal about the finished product. That obviously matters.
Mm-hmm.
But I, as the instructor of the course, have to care about how did you learn and grow.
Yeah.
That's what they've got to tell me about because I can see the finished product. Like I'm there the whole semester. I see the work they're doing,
Right.
but I need them to be able to tell me and other people. So I get people from outside the class to listen to them to talk about this was my learning process.
Hmm. Wow. And what a great portfolio to be able to carry forward if you're going to apply to any kind of a program or college. Like, here's what I did in high school. Imagine what I can do at your place.
Right.
Wow. Oh, love it. I love it so much. You had mentioned research, and I'm just curious, like, do you, as a librarian who knows about research skills, do you find yourself like, detouring here and there into like, okay, we're going to talk about here's some ways to do good search, or do you just kind of point them in a direction and say, let me help you get there?
Both. It depends on where we're at.
Mm,
Sometimes, like, I'll just have to guide them, like, hey, since we're doing it on this specific region, then this is where we need to look because this is the area that we look, right? Like, we need to look at the ARC if we're looking about something that's Appalachian region specific. So I generally don't do a lot of like whole group. Okay, here is generally what we do for research. It's usually in small groups when it comes and hits. That's whenever I
hmm
start doing a deep dive with them. That okay, if we're hitting here, now we need like if this is your specific topic and this is where you're stuck, or this is where you need to research and look. Now we'll start going together and doing it. Um, but yeah, I
Making it.
totally could do that at the beginning. They kind of get so antsy to take off
Oh
that
yeah.
let them and just kind of hit it whenever it feels natural.
I think that totally makes sense. And, by giving them that just in time instruction, they're going to then take that and use it in the moment rather than, I taught you about this 3 weeks ago. Do you remember? Now that you're getting to the point where you need to use it. So it totally makes sense to me. Oh, man. This is such an amazing project. And it's funny because I've got some seventh and eighth graders who work on passion projects, but I never made the connection that I need them to think about how is what they're working on affecting others. Like that, I'm 112% ripping that off and putting that into the next iteration of this class I'm doing because that is such an incredibly important element to get them thinking beyond just themselves. Because, I mean, kids will dive into the middle of anything and they'll start doing, but then they get to a point where they may not see where to go from here because they don't really have that endpoint or they don't have that thought about how does this connect in other ways. So, oh, yeah. Oh, man. That's one of the things I love about doing this podcast is I get to learn so many awesome things and so many great pieces of information that are going to help make me a better teacher. Man, awesome. Okay, sorry, I got off track because I was just so blown away there. Let me bring it back around to what kind of feedback have you gotten from the students?
It's generally always been really positive. I've had a couple students that've been like, being able or being set loose the way that I was really scary. Could you like in the future make sure that there's more guardrails? Like that was like the first iteration of class I ever taught. And I was
Okay,
like, that's great. Thank you for giving me that.
yeah.
Because some students are like, I think about it like the allegory of the cave. And like they've just been dragged out of the darkness and there's just all this sunlight of freedom. And they're like, take me back to the cave. Like, just tell me what to research. Tell me what to do. Um, And that's the way I think about it sometimes. I'm just like, all right, here, learn. Um, so I'm like, okay, some students need that, and that's okay. So I kind of like try to individualize as much as possible based off of that. Because some students thrive on that and they love it. Like, give me the freedom. I'm, I'll see you again in March or whatever, like I'm off. And others would be like, hey, can you kind of help me out with this? Perfect. That's what I'm here for. And that's kind of how like I make sure that I'm hitting like students with special ed, if they need assistance there or whatever, that this class is based off of you. I'm not comparing you to anyone else in this class. This class is what you need in your growth, and your learning. So I don't care what you look like compared to the person next to you. I care about how you're learning. So I kind of took that as part of that initial feedback of needing the guardrails is okay, that makes sense because every student's a different human. So I need to make sure that they're getting what they need based on them, like making sure they tell and know they can tell me what they need, and not try to put everyone's expectations the same way. I remember some of the best feedback I ever got was I had a couple 4.0 students, those kids, the kids that are 4.0 on purpose. And they're like, this was the hardest class I ever took. And I'm like, yes. Like, it's like, what do you mean by that though? And they're like, well, we've always taken classes specifically because we know that we can get an A in it. But in this class, you challenged us to do something like this out of our comfort zone. And we've never been out of our comfort zone before. And we didn't know how to handle it. And I'm like, yes, perfect. That's what it's supposed to be. Like, that's the purpose of the class, is to give you a different experience, to make you do something you've never done before, and to make you look at learning differently.
Yeah. Have you gotten any feedback from other teachers about how this lesson has played out in some way with them, or that they've noticed?
Yeah. Initially, there was a lot of reservation about it. Was that, whoa, you're not teaching it, the way that we've always taught. So that's why I brought in the state standards into it, so that students could say, hey, we are hitting all these things we're supposed to hit. We're still doing what we're supposed to do. It's not just going to the library and hanging out with Hensley and doing whatever for 5 months or whatever. So them being able to go out and proselytize on my behalf has been awesome. That the kids been like, oh, hey, like we did this really cool thing. And them being like in the newspaper for whatever they've done. Oh, whoa, like they're actually doing really cool things. Them getting like scholarship opportunities or whatever it might be. Because of like the local things they did, like that got a lot of teacher buy-in. So when I first, back in 2015, when I first started working on the initial project proposal, that was my first semester. I had been in the library for 3 weeks. Like, oh, hey, do you mind if I try to redo this school? So I was already starting out on a great foot. So 2017 was my 3rd year, and I'm like, all right, I'm teaching things differently. This is the way things work now. So understandable reservation on their part that this wild man has come into our school and is trying to change it. But I think that they could see that I was doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah. I mean, it's clear that this is all about the students. Like you're there for them in the way that they need you to be there for them, which is, it's good teaching. It's good learning. It's good education. So if somebody says, this is amazing, like I have, and they want to like try this out with their students, are there any things people should have in mind as they're trying to start out a lesson like this or a class like this?
Yeah, I think that you would need to have a good understanding yourself of your community. So I have lived in my community my entire life. So I am from here. I didn't have a lot of connections built in because I'm from here, but I'm like from the trailer park. Like I didn't know the mayor or anyone. I was just a dude who showed up as librarian. So I knew our community and things that it needed, like areas of improvement, but I didn't know the people that were over those things. Like who were these people we can connect to? So there was a lot of front loading on my behalf of figuring out who these people are, reaching out, making connections, letting them know like who I am, what I'm trying to accomplish, and then putting the kids in front. So that was a lot of the front loading for me, was just building those connections with people in the community, and then knowing what those things are, so that when the students are having a discussion, like so I can talk to them about it. Like if they bring up whatever, if they bring up the waste management system in our community, I don't know why that would, but you never know. They're like, oh, hey, like the person that's over that is this person. And that's, you can't have all those things memorized, but you can at least have an understanding of the way local government works or which nonprofits you have that are close to the school. Maybe your school is fortunate enough to have or maybe your school district has a community partnership or a community person that you can work through. We used to have one of those when we had COVID money. Oh, the good old days. We no longer have one of those, unfortunately. But something like that, if you can just have at least a base understanding of your community and things that the students might end up saying. Because something I have to tell my students is that I am now 34 years old. Like what I see is like wrong in the community is very different from what you all think whenever you're 16. Like when I started teaching the class, I was 27. Like I was pretty close in age to them at that point. Now I'm an old man, and they can tell by looking at me. And like what we think about the community is very, very different. So I can give you guidance on things, but I don't want to take away your voice. So I don't want to give you the answers. Whenever you're trying to think of what could we do here, I'm not going to say do this. So don't give them the answers and don't take away their thought process, them trying to think critically about what could be done here. Let them think through it, because that's where the learning happens, is them trying to think through what could happen. Because I have seen other people attempt to teach it, and they immediately start telling, we could do this, and this. And like, you just took away every bit of like the purpose. The way I think about it is if, Steve, you and I went to the gym, and you went and lifted all the weights, and I watched you. Who got stronger?
I love it. That's a great analogy. Yeah, because here I am. Yeah, if I'm picking up all the weights, you're going to see me picking up the weights. Maybe you understand how to pick up the weights, but without having the experience,
I learned some form from you, but I never did any application. So I could maybe attempt to, but I've never tried it before. I didn't get to try it with you that knows what you're doing there to help me do the process.
And especially if it's watch me do it for 4 years and then, okay, now you go off and do it. And now you don't have that person that can spot you, that can help you with your form. If when you try and execute this thing you've only seen done before, it's not quite right.
Yeah.
I like that analogy. That's great.
Thank you. I came up with that one.
That's awesome. I mean, this whole lesson is awesome, and you are awesome. I always love talking to you because you always have such great ideas, and you always are focused on what's going to be best for the students and how can I make sure that they're getting what they need out of whatever's going on, which is awesome. So thank you so much for sharing this lesson. I'm going to bring us in a completely different direction now. We're going to take our book break. Book break. Squiddy! So for the book break, you can share any title you like. It could be something professional, personal. It could be something for students, for staff, for yourself, whatever. Any book you like. Could be more than one book, whatever you like. What's something you want to share with everybody?
All right. So I am a generally really convivial person. I'm happy all the time. So my reading life does not reflect that whatsoever. I love reading horror. Horror is my genre. It has always been my genre. Since I was a wee child, I have loved horror. And my favorite book that I've read in the past 5 years, which has become probably my favorite book of all time, is called House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski. It is it's an adult horror book, so not one for your library, no matter what level you're at. That school library, that is. College library, throw it out there, see what happens. But it is a postmodern horror. Postmodern as in the text and position of text is part of the story. So the text itself is a labyrinth. So you have to find your way through the book. And the story is a research paper about a movie about a family that buys a house, and the house is bigger on the inside than the outside. So someone finds this research paper, and they start making they're trying to finish the footnotes. So they're telling their own story in the footnotes of the story itself. So you're trying to learn the story of Johnny Truant through his footnotes, and you can very quickly learn through what he's saying and what he adds into the index and into the back of the book that he's a completely you can't trust him as a narrator because he has mental health issues. And you learn the story of his mother in an institution through his notes that he's making while also still reading the book, like reading the research paper, and trying to find yourself through it. So it's such it's a difficult book to read, and I fully understand that. I have given several copies. I've bought like 8 copies for myself at this point and given away 6 of them because I'm like, man, you've got to read this book. It's so good. And several people will be like, that was so good. And other people, like 30 pages in, is like, this is ridiculous. Take it back. So for me, I absolutely love it. And I think it is not a horror book. I think it's a romance novel because there is so much about the relationship between the family in the research paper that the movie is about. And the space between them and their relationship is noted by the space between the lines in the text in the book.
Oh, wow.
So there are some pages where there's a line at the very top and the line at the very bottom of the page because they're very distant in both space and in their relationship. Wow. So it's like geographic space, it's familial space. Oh my gosh, it's so much. I've read it 3 or 4 times at this point, and I keep finding new things in it. And whenever we were at ASL in Tampa, and a couple of us went upstairs at the convention center. For those of you who were not at ASL last year, there was a tattoo convention upstairs.
Yes.
And I went upstairs with a few other librarians, and I got the opening line to the book tattooed.
That is commitment to a book.
That is commitment to a book. So Mark Danielewski, do not become problematic. Do not get canceled.
What is the opening line of the book? I got to know.
This is not for you.
Interesting.
Indeed.
Okay.
Which I have discovered for several people that tried to read it, it was not for them.
I have seen passages from this book. I haven't read the book, but I've seen passages, and I remember reading somewhere a couple of pages of it, and just the feeling of dread that he was able to elicit in just talking about this house being bigger on the inside than the outside. I couldn't figure out what he was doing that was making me feel that way, but it was so effective.
Yeah. It took him 10 years to write the book, which I can tell just from all of the time I've spent with it. I'm like, yes, this was like someone's life work, obviously.
Wow. I'll have to see if I can track that one back down at my library. Love it. I love getting something that's a little bit off the beaten path, and that is definitely sounds like it's a little off the beaten path.
Most definitely, yeah.
So before we are on our merry way, if people want to find you online because you're always doing amazing stuff, where should they go looking for you?
Yeah, you can find me at DS Hensley EDU. I am on the Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. It's Twitter.
Whatever. Yeah.
I'm on Blue Sky. I am on Threads. I am on Instagram. I think that's all the places I am. So that's where I am. Since Elmo took over Twitter and kind of ruined it, it kind of took away my zest for social media there for a while. So hoping I can get back on the horse there in the beautiful confines of Blue Sky, maybe. Who knows? We'll see.
We'll see.
But I love connecting with my fellow librarians and talking about everything librarianship. So please reach out. Let's talk.
Yeah, you definitely want to talk to Dustin. Believe me, he is the best. So, Dustin, again, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your lesson, and I appreciate this awesome book recommendation I'm going to have to track down.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks for checking out this episode of the SLLN podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes, which include not only a link to the lesson, but also links to the SLLN website, home to a curated list of free upcoming virtual events and resources for school librarians. It's easy to become a member of the network. Just visit the site and use what you like. If you have an idea, a question, or a lesson you want to share, you can email schoolliblearning@gmail.com. That's school, L-I-B, learning@gmail.com. Know someone with a great school library lesson? Let us know. Until next time, be safe, be good, and be well.